because I think coming into a movie with that title is going to color your impressions differently than The Godfather Part 3. What do you think, Chris?
I agree. I don't think it should have been called The Death of Michael Corleone because that's a preconception to already go in knowing what's going to happen, unless they spin it to something else also happening and just being that as the main thing. But I don't think they should have called it The Death of Michael Corleone. I think they were right in the choice to leave it as The Godfather 3. The name alone is synonymous with Oscars and award winning, so why fix it if it ain't broken?
Because it was Coppola himself that wanted to call it The Death of Michael Corleone.
Well, I understand that, but you have to understand that though Coppola was the mind behind it, he had to have something to sit there, at least an inkling to say, why should I call it that? And, ergo, somebody talk sense into him and to leave it as such, Godfather 3.
Zach, what do you think?
No, I agree with you, Chris, and I think Paramount had the right idea, too. I mean, the first two films were called Godfather and Godfather Part 2, so to change it up for a third would have been kind of off-brand, I mean, Godfather Part 2 is arguably the best sequel ever made. I mean, it was certainly considered as such at the time. And, they want to continue that legacy, and if you switch up the subtitle, it changes the legacy. So I totally understand where Coppola's coming from, because it is more like an epilogue. He has labeled it as such and described it as such, but ultimately, when it comes down to how are we going to market this film, you want to call it Part 3, because that means it's part of the greater whole, so you have to see it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, I kind of like the idea of calling it The Death of Michael Corleone, because we're going to kind of jump into the discussion here, but the Godfather series, to me, is really about Michael Corleone's inability to achieve his father's greatness. And there's some kind of disconnect, and I'm not sure, after rewatching it, what that disconnect is and why he's incapable. It's probably because he wasn't trained by his father to be the Godfather. He was brought in late, but because in the beginning of the series, he wanted to keep himself away from his family, so he joins the military. He goes to fight off to the war. He comes back after the war, and then because of the attempt on his father, he gets involved and he gets brought in, and his life changes, and he begins to change. And even when he does change and joins the family, his entire goal for the whole series of films is to make the Corleone family legitimate. And that was never a goal of his father's, right? And so maybe this is where the disconnect is, now that I'm talking out loud, because he has this vision of stopping crime, so he's not fully committed to what the family's goals are. He's willing to do them for now. He's willing to do the illegal things. He's willing to get involved in gambling and drugs and prostitutes. He's willing to kill people, but he doesn't want to stay there. He wants to get the family legitimate. So his entire goal is to get into legitimate businesses. And he's losing his family while he does this. He lost his wife in the second one. And in this third one here, he's alone. He doesn't have anybody. He's back in New York. He's away from where he wanted to go. He's back where he started, and he's a sick old man, and he's got nothing. And he loses his daughter in this film. And by the end of it, he's alone. And so to me, this is the death of Michael Corleone. And if you were to label this film as the death of Michael Corleone, you would have preconceptions going into the film the first time. Because it's a gangster film, you would probably expect a hit of some sort to be what kills him. But in the end, to have him die alone in Italy, it's almost like it's not just him dying, it's all of him and all of his family aspirations that are dying. It's not just the death of the person, it's the death of everything he wanted. So I like the title of The Death of Michael Corleone. Chris?
It's not just the death of the character. It's the death of the redemption that he sought throughout the movie. He tried to seek redemption from the Catholic Church. He then tried to seek redemption from Don Altobello. And he then tried to seek redemption from Kay. All three know. And this is where I think the death of Michael Corleone could actually be on some pseudo-psychological level, that all three of them knew that there is no redemption. Because he was this terrible man to order hits, to order murders, to kill his brother, nonetheless, his mother's son, as he exclaims and cries out. I think, now that you talk about it, Brandon, if they meant it on that pseudo-psychological level, and then showed at the end where he died in a lawn chair, that would be an alright title for me to understand. Mm-hmm. But just to see it first, not seeing the movie, see the trailer first, let's say, or not even the trailer, just see the title, Death of Michael Corleone, I think going in it, I would have already preconception that this character who's brought the family to life, who's basically the main star of this, the duology, now trilogy, why would I want to go see it? Yeah, exactly. Why would I want to go see it? But seeing the movie, this on a psychological or a pseudo-psychological level, yes, I can see the title.
Well, I guess you could ask this of all sequels, right? Because that's what we're here to do. But is this movie necessary? Because you think about the final shot of 3, and he's alone in a chair, and yes, he dies, right? But you think about the final shot of 2, and he's sitting outside, older, alone in a chair, right? So it gets the same point across. Now, I will say this. It's interesting to see how things have progressed in the last 20, 30 years since between 2 and 3. That's interesting. You of course, you're always interested to see what is the fallout between him and his children. Like, who knows that he killed his brother? How does he deal with that? What does he feel guilt? Would he even seek redemption? These are interesting ideas, and they're interesting to see. But ultimately, I think the message that we see here was perfectly told in the end of 2, where he loses everything as well. So ultimately, it's unnecessary but interesting, regardless of how well we think it was executed.
See, I got to disagree with you completely there, Zach. I think that this movie was absolutely essential because of Michael Corleone constantly saying, I want to go legitimate. I want to go legitimate. You mentioned it in the last movie that I wanted to go legitimate. That was 7 years ago. You said you'd do it in 5. And in this, he finally goes legitimate in what he thinks legitimacy is. The most legitimate thing out there is the Catholic Church, only to find corruption at the top levels there. So, like, this complete phony representation of what he thinks legitimacy is all around him. And the entire business world is illegitimate and corrupt. And we saw that at the end of the first movie when he's talking with Kane. He says, my father is like a politician.
Right.
And she says, well, how can he be like a politician? He doesn't kill people. Now who's being naive?
Exactly.
And now it's Michael Corleone who's being naive. Because he has this dream of legitimacy that's just not there in the corporate world. So that's why I think this movie is necessary. And that's what I think is completely fascinating about this film. We had in the first movie, the church people have the Catholic Church and the mafia are like tied, where they're like, the mafia seems to be these really strong Catholic religious people. We saw it in The Sopranos, and they're constantly doing these terrible, terrible crimes, yet their faith is such a strong pillar of who they are. We saw it in the first film when he was baptizing. I don't know if it was his daughter or his niece or whoever. He's baptizing that child, and there's murders going on while he's absolving this baby of all future sin and stuff. He's going through this ceremony of being this awesome person. The Vatican is honoring him in public, and they even say, look, when you're involved with this company, which I can't remember the name of right now. You guys remember the name of the company? Immobiliari. All your past sins will be absolved and they will see who you are as a businessman. So they're using the church to absolve their sins. So even their corruption, they're trying to cover up with the church. And even this new pope who comes in is like, look, I can absolve you of your sins, but you're not you aren't going to change.
Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting scene when he's talking to the man who becomes the Pope, where he even says like, "What good is what good is forgiveness without repentance?" Right? Mm-hmm. That's an interesting comment but he sees, he's like, "You will not change." He can kind of call him for what he is. So, and I agree, Brandon. I think that was interesting. Again, there's a lot of interesting Michael dialogue in here. His observations, because I think he's talking to Vincent, and he's like, "The higher up I get, I continue to see corruption. It doesn't matter how high I go," which is because that's why he turned away from his family's way of life in the first film. He didn't want to be part of this. And then he finds himself leading like the ultimate, like he's committed. I mean, as far as we know, he's committed way more atrocities, if you will, than his father ever did. I mean, having his own family members killed for sure. And you can really tell he does regret this stuff. I mean, he breaks down and cries when he's confessing that he killed his brother. I mean, he thinks about, when he's having his like heart attack there, he's calling out his brother's name, and we go so far to see like the flashbacks of the second one, when Fredo was killed. And I guess it's because, I mean, this movie did come out a good 25 years after that one, so that just in case you didn't know what really happened. I did think it was interesting that Connie still apparently thinks Fredo drowned. She doesn't know the truth.
That's one of the points I had on my notes.
Yeah. Okay, you go ahead first, Chris, because I've got my own take on this. So you go ahead, Chris, because this is great. I'm really glad we're talking about Connie, because she had quite the arc in these three films.
And yes. I was just going to say that too, Brandon. I'm glad that we're going to talk about Connie. When we visit Godfather 1, Connie's this innocent young lady. And Carlo dies, or Carlo gets hit, whatever have you. In Godfather 2, which happens 10 years later, she's already had 2 sons, one of which has gone to jail, so she's become this Elizabeth Taylor type personality. And as now, 25 years later, she becomes the caretaker for Michael. And ultimately, when Michael gets sick, I guess she becomes the head of the family for 5 seconds, where she orders the hit on,
Mr. Big from Sex and the City, yeah.
No. Joe Mantegna. No, it was Joe Mantegna. It was carrying Joey Zaza, where she orders the hit on him, and she becomes this figure. And I didn't think of her at first. When I first saw this movie years ago, I didn't like the character. I didn't like the way she turned out, because she didn't really strike me as influential. Years later, now you watch the movie, of course, your mind starts to wander. But the character of Connie's arc, like you said, Brandon, really takes a twist and turn to somewhat supplement yet complete the Corleone family triangle, octagon, however you want to put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, again, in the first one, like, she's beaten by her husband, they're fighting, like, she tears that apartment apart. In part 2, she's just this train wreck. To me, she looks like she's a drunk, like she's smoking and she's got no money, right? She's a mess in the second one. And this one here, she's got some control. She's kind of like Michael's second hand. Now my impression, because, like, Michael Corleone's daughter, like, all these people are talking about, did he kill his own brother? Did he kill his own? This is something that's talked about. And in my opinion, when Michael's sick and Connie's taking care of him and she says, poor Fredo drowned, in my interpretation of that scene is she knows what happened. She knows what Michael did. But she's talking to him like, and says it then because she's saying something along the lines of, look, I know what you did and I know why you did it, because I've now had to make decisions like that myself, but I'm going to continue this facade of me thinking that he drowned because I'm okay with your decision. I've finally come to terms with your decision, Michael. Yeah, That's how I read that scene.
That crossed my mind as well, Brandon. I thought, is she saying this more for him to kind of reassure him more than this is what she actually believes? There is a certain bit of ambiguity there. I agree.
I
see, and I think they can both of them are reading through the lie of what she's saying in that scene. He knows what she's saying. Michael knows that Connie's saying, I know you killed my brother, but I know why you did it, and I forgive you for it. So I'll just say you drowned him. Or you didn't drown him. He drowned, sorry.
Or is she living the lie as a protection still because of the kids.